Greetings to my fellow peace blunderers, and today we're looking at yet another trap that you can use relatively often and have fun games and quick wins. None of that you can only use this trap in an obscure situation once in 1,000 games nonsense. With this trap, we are talking Germany going out of the World Cup at group stage kind of often. Haha, Germany, bloody hell. Anyway, let's start fishing for some easy ranking points with the fishing pole trap. The classical variation of the trap, but not the only one, and this is very important, starts from the Ruy Lopez. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, knight f6, going into the Berlin, and now castles. From here on out, we start springing the trap with the unorthodox knight g4. Now, the one thing you need to know about this trap is it's kind of a one-trick pony. After knight to g4 on move 4, you're already losing as black. White has got +2 advantage according to the engine. The reason why it is so is that the knight on g4 by itself is kind of useless and misplaced, and you've just spent 2 moves in a row to get it there. If white so wishes, they can completely ignore the g4 knight and play the normal moves like c3, d4 and keep playing the game, trying to prove that the knight is not actually any threat at all. However, if white chooses not to ignore it and plays h3, it's actually the best move for white, and white is still winning, but we are one step closer to actually making the trap happen. And now the point of the trap is that instead of just retreating the knight as white would expect you to, you play the extremely aggressive h5. And again, white is still winning for the same reason I told you a move before. They can completely ignore the knight on g4 and play in a normal way, c3, d4, all that good stuff. But if white decides to be greedy and takes the knight on g4, the trap finally springs. Black is now completely winning with h takes g, with lots of threats coming with it. The pawn on g4 is now attacking a knight, so it has to move somewhere or get captured. We've just opened up the h file for the rook, and once the knight is gone, we can move the queen onto h4 and deliver some mating threats on h1 and h2. And from here on out, every move that white can make loses. They will either get mated or lose a lot of material. One example of a quick mate is that if knight goes to e1 and we now play queen h4 as I promised you, f3 or f4, trying to make space for the king, but it's simply not good enough. After g3, the mate is unstoppable. White just makes a random move, let's say d4, and now the mate is delivered, the game is won. And if the knight does not move and something like d4 happens on the board, we can of course capture it, and after queen recaptures, we get a comfortable winning position. A sample continuation is queen h4 again, threatening mate, queen h3 defending, takes, and then knight takes d4. We are a pawn up, and we are very comfortable here. More material, more active pieces, very pleasant position. Now coming back to this position, you can argue that white will never ever be silly enough to capture that knight on g4 and will instead just play normally and win. However, I can assure you that in blitz and bullet games, this method, especially on lower to mid-range rating levels, will still remain very effective. You'll be surprised how many white players, especially under time pressure, will just capture the knight without thinking and hope they can defend it. This is one of the traps that is more setup based rather than position based, which means that you can use it in many different situations, not necessarily this exact one. Another such example comes from an offspring of Caracal, not Ruy Lopez this time, and we do the same thing. Knight g4, waiting for h3 and then h5. Again, if white does not take and proceeds to ignore it and plays normally, white will win, but if white takes, we respond with takes of course, and now black has turned the table and is winning. Now, it's very hard to tell when exactly this trick works and when it doesn't, but what I've come to realize after analyzing a couple of positions is that it almost certainly does not work when the white pieces have the dark squared bishop opened up. What do I mean by this? Check this out. h3, h5 takes, and we're again threatening the f3 knight, but because the c1 bishop is open, the knight can now jump to g5 and the knight is protected. And not only that, from g5 it blocks the vital d8 h4 diagonal that the queen really wants to use. And if you want to do something like f6, kicking the knight away, of course the e6 pawn is hanging, but even if it wasn't, the knight would probably retreat to e4, and now your f6 pawn is blocking the diagonal instead of the knight. So be careful when using this trap, be well aware that it can easily backfire, but don't shy away from using it from time to time. It can turn your positions into very fun messes, and it's awesome. Let me know in the comments what you think of that trap, and if you just so happened to find this video useful, please like and subscribe, follow me on Twitch, find me on chess.com, join the Discord, all that good stuff. I will talk to you very soon, my favorite unintentional gambiters. Love you all, see ya in the next one.